Welcome to the Best Ever PC Benchmark channel. Today we're benchmarking Horizon Forbidden West using stock AMD Ryzen 7, 9800 X3D, and NVIDIA RTX 3090. We captured gameplay using CapFrameX and Riva Tuner. Quick stat, over 96% of you aren't subscribed. Let's flip that. Help us reach 1,000 subs by hitting like, leaving a comment, and smashing subscribe. Let's launch into the benchmarks. We're diving into Horizon Forbidden West at 1080p, running natively on the RTX 3090. No upscalers, just raw horsepower at 3 different quality presets. Very high. On the very high preset, the RTX 3090 averages around 90 FPS. This setting pushes the game's visuals to the limit. You get full quality textures, volumetric lighting, ambient occlusion, screen space reflections, and densely packed geometry. Environments feel alive. Vegetation sways dynamically. Character animations stay fluid even in action-heavy moments. And post-processing effects like depth of field and motion blur stay razor-sharp. Despite all that visual complexity, performance stays incredibly smooth. During traversal, melee encounters, or boss fights, the 1% lows stay solid. The frame rate may not hit the 144Hz sweet spot, but it's buttery enough for cinematic gameplay. This is the setting you pick when you want to see Horizon Forbidden West in all its visual glory at 1080p, without any upscaling or trickery. Medium. Drop things down to medium, and performance climbs to an impressive 140 FPS average. You'll notice fewer particles, reduced terrain tessellation, simpler reflections, and a slightly flatter lighting model. But honestly, the game still looks gorgeous. This preset feels like it was tuned to give you a balanced experience. You still get the richness of the world, but now with snappier input and headroom for higher refresh rate panels. Combat feels more reactive, camera swings stay crisp, and fast traversal segments benefit from the extra fluidity. If you're playing on a 120 or 144 Hz monitor and want smoothness without giving up too much eye candy, medium is easily the smart choice. Very low. Now let's talk raw speed. Very low pushes the RTX 3090 to a blazing 180 FPS average. This preset strips things back, lighting is more basic, shadow detail drops significantly. Draw distances are shorter, and a lot of environmental animation is gone. But if you're all about responsiveness, whether for fast inputs, minimal motion blur, or just pure fluid gameplay, this is where the 3090 shows off. Perfect for players who prioritize input latency over visuals, or for those on ultra-high refresh rate displays. And even though this is the lowest setting, Horizon's art style still carries the visual presentation, keeping things far from ugly. A reminder that with the right GPU, even low settings can feel premium. We're pushing the resolution to 1440p, testing Horizon Forbidden West without any upscalers. Just raw pixel pushing from the RTX 3090. Let's break it down by each setting. Very high. At 1440p, very high, the RTX 3090 averages around 70 FPS. This preset enables nearly every visual feature. Ultra-detailed textures, maxed-out foliage density, advanced lighting effects, and complex shader work. The increased pixel count makes the environments feel even sharper and more immersive compared to 1080p. Despite that, the 3090 keeps up well. Traversing the open world, combat encounters, and cutscenes all remain smooth and visually stunning. You'll see minor dips in dense forest areas or heavily scripted moments, but nothing that breaks the experience. Keep in mind, at very high settings, the game pushes over 10 gigabytes of VRAM usage, something only top-tier cards like the 3090 handle comfortably. If you want uncompromised fidelity at 1440p, this is your go-to preset. Medium. Drop to medium and performance climbs to around 110 FPS. This is a noticeable step up in responsiveness. The RTX 3090 breezes through combat, traversal, and cinematic moments. Visually, there's a reduction in ambient detail, simplified shadows, and lower terrain LODs. But it still looks great thanks to strong texture work and art design. The game world remains immersive, just a bit cleaner and sharper thanks to the improved frame rate. This is a great setting for high refresh rate gaming at 1440p. Perfect if you're targeting that 100 to 120 Hz sweet spot without dipping into upscalers. It strikes a smart balance between performance and visual quality that feels right at home on a card like the 3090. Very low. At very low, the RTX 3090 delivers around 130 frames per second average. You'll instantly notice the visual trade-offs: basic shadows, reduced effects, simplified vegetation, and minimal lighting complexity. But what you lose in fidelity, you gain in speed. This is where Horizon Forbidden West feels like a competitive shooter. snappy controls, ultra-low latency, and hyper-fluid movement. If you're using a high refresh rate display or want minimal distractions and fast combat sequences, this setting delivers. And even on very low, the game retains a strong sense of atmosphere. It's stripped down but still stylish. The 3090 doesn't even break a sweat here. It just flies. Let's break down how different anti-aliasing methods affect both visuals and performance at 1080p with everything cranked to very high. We're testing SMAA, TAA, and DLAA, all rendered natively with no upscaling. SMAA. At an average of 90 frames per second, SMAA offers solid performance with very little cost to frame rate, making it an attractive option for players chasing high responsiveness. Visually, SMAA renders a relatively sharp image with decent edge clarity in still scenes, but the weaknesses begin to show in motion. Rapid movement through dense foliage or during fast-paced combat reveals noticeable edge shimmer and aliasing, particularly on hair, leaves, wires, and thin geometry. It doesn't offer any temporal stability, so shimmering and flickering are more frequent. That said, it's a decent lightweight solution for those prioritizing raw performance over image stability. If you're using a high refresh rate display and don't mind the occasional jaggies, SMAA gets the job done without compromising your frame rate. TAA. With TAA enabled, average performance bumps up slightly to around 100 FPS, which is surprising given its heavier compute load compared to SMAA. TA excels at reducing edge flicker and shimmering, especially in scenes filled with vegetation, character hair, or fine environmental detail. In motion, it maintains image stability and eliminates most of the visual noise seen with SMAA. However, this comes at the cost of sharpness. Distant textures and thin details take on a slight blur, and image clarity can look softer overall. It's a middle ground option. You get a smoother visual experience in fast movement without completely tanking image quality or performance. If you're playing the game more cinematically or exploring slower-paced areas, TAA adds polish to the presentation without being too intrusive on frame rate. DLAA. DLAA drops the average frame rate to about 80 FPS, making it the most demanding of the three, but the visual payoff is immediately apparent. It offers the cleanest and most detailed image quality of the bunch, with razor-sharp textures, pristine edge clarity, and virtually no shimmer, even during high-speed traversal or close-range combat. Hair strands, tree branches, and particle effects retain their detail without fuzzing out or flickering. Unlike upscalers, DLAA maintains native resolution while adding AI-enhanced edge smoothing, so there's no artificial softness or blurring. This makes it ideal for visual purists who want every scene to look like a high-res screenshot. If you're aiming for cinematic immersion and don't mind dipping below 100 FPS for richer fidelity, DLAA is by far the best choice. At 1080p very high, we've now enabled the available upscalers, DLSS, FSR2, and XESS, each tested on the quality preset. Visual fidelity is preserved, and performance gets a notable lift compared to native. DLSS leads the pack here, delivering around 100 FPS on average. NVIDIA's AI-driven upscaling keeps textures crisp, motion stable, and fine details like Aloy's hair and foliage shimmering to a minimum. Compared to native rendering, you gain nearly 30 FPS while still keeping the game visually rich. There's minimal artifacting even in high-action sequences. Camera pans, particle effects, and lighting transitions remain fluid. This is easily the top-tier option if you're on an RTX GPU and want the best blend of image quality and performance. DLSS at 1080p on very high feels like native, only faster. FSR2. AMD's FSR2 comes in close behind at around 120 FPS. The image is clean overall, though edge definition can blur slightly in motion-heavy areas. Still, it's a solid alternative for those not on NVIDIA hardware, or anyone looking to push more frames with minimal quality sacrifice. The performance bump is almost identical to DLSS, and the visual differences are hard to spot unless you freeze frame. For Radeon users or those seeking a more open-source friendly option, FSR2 does a great job here. XESS. Intel's XESS clocks in around 120 FPS on average, trailing slightly behind the others, but still offering a respectable boost. Image sharpness is decent, though there's occasional shimmering in hair strands and some softness during fast camera movement. However, in most gameplay scenarios, exploration, stealth, or combat, it holds up well. For a vendor-agnostic solution, XESS has matured nicely and feels right at home here. Not quite as refined as DLSS, but more than playable with good consistency. Now let's move to 1440p. The increased resolution naturally improves image clarity, but anti-aliasing still plays a key role in smoothing out edges, especially in motion. Let's see how each method holds up under the added GPU load and how well they balance performance with fidelity. SMAA. At 1440p, SMAA averages around 90 FPS. Strong performance for those prioritizing responsiveness. Thanks to the pixel density of this resolution, some of SMAA's limitations are softened naturally. Jagged edges are less prominent than at 1080p, and the overall image looks crisper without any performance penalty. However, issues like edge shimmer still creep in, particularly on reflective surfaces like water, rooftops, and metal, or in wide landscapes with distant trees. When the camera pans quickly or the scene gets chaotic, you'll still spot flickering edges. It's a good enough option if you're focused on high FPS and aren't too bothered by small artifacts. Think of SMAA here as a lightweight boost for high refresh rate play that doesn't try to mask imperfections, just sidesteps them. TAA. TAA delivers better edge smoothness with fewer shimmering issues compared to SMAA, and performance climbs even higher, up to around 120 frames per second. At this resolution, TAA has more room to breathe, and the softness that was more apparent at 1080p is now less of a problem. Motion looks cleaner, character outlines stay more consistent, and distant objects hold together well without distracting aliasing. The overall image stability improves significantly, especially during traversal, combat, or weather effects like dust storms and rain. If you're playing on a 144Hz monitor and prefer a more visually cohesive experience over razor-sharp pixel precision, TAA hits the sweet spot. The only downside? A very slight reduction in texture clarity, but in actual gameplay, it's often hard to notice. DLAA. DLAA continues to be the champion of image quality, but it now averages around 70 FPS, down from its performance at 1080p. That drop is notable, but so is the visual improvement. Every edge is pristine, foliage has incredible depth, shadows render without flicker, and the water surfaces, especially when moving, look absurdly good. This is the AA setting you use when you're filming, exploring, or just want to enjoy the game as a visual showcase. Fast-paced players might feel the drop in responsiveness, especially if you're used to 100+ FPS. But for everything else, from cinematic cutscenes to slow walks through lush environments, it's hard to go back once you see DLAA in motion. It's also worth noting that if you're using VRR or G.Sync, the 70 FPS average still feels smooth and consistent. At 1440p with the very high preset, upscalers really show their strength. You're getting native-like visuals with a significant jump in frame rate, perfect for high refresh 1440p monitors. Let's break it down by each option. DLSS. DLSS once again pulls ahead, averaging about 100 frames per second on the quality preset. You get the same high-fidelity presentation as native 1440p, with boosted performance across exploration and combat. Foliage, shadows, and character models retain their fine details, and movement remains stable even in heavy battles. Hair strands, water effects, and specular lighting all look natural. DLSS handles them without breaking down. You might spot minor ghosting in fast camera pans, but it's nothing distracting. If you're on an RTX card and playing at 1440p, this is your best bet. Performance, image quality, and consistency all check out. FSR2. AMD's FSR2 comes in just a few frames behind DLSS with an average of 80 FPS. Visually, it holds up very well at this resolution. The differences between DLSS and FSR2 are subtle. Some texture sharpness may take a minor hit, and motion clarity can dip slightly in dense scenes. Still, it's hard to fault the result. The game feels fluid, crisp, and fast. FSR2's advantage is flexibility. It works on a wider range of GPUs and maintains good image quality even on AMD or older hardware. You're not losing much here in side-by-side comparisons, and you still gain a healthy FPS boost. XESS. Intel's XESS lands just behind the others, holding steady at 70 FPS average. In terms of performance, it's competitive. Visually, XESS is serviceable, but a bit more prone to edge shimmer and motion softness, especially in Aloy's hair or when sprinting through grassy areas. Still, it keeps the game looking sharp in most gameplay situations, and fast action scenes hold up well thanks to the high frame rate. It's not as refined as DLSS, but still gets the job done at 1440p. Is RTX 3090 still enough for Horizon Forbidden West in 2025? Absolutely. Whether you're targeting 1080p or 1440p with upscalers or native, The RTX 3090 delivers remarkably well in Horizon Forbidden West. Even very high settings are easily hit with smooth frame rates. If you like these insights, let me know in the comments which game to test next. Smash that like button and subscribe. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.